Verse 1. At that time, Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were hungered, and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day. Okay, what was not lawful to do on the Sabbath day?
Pick the corn.
Work. That's right, work. And picking corn to them was work. And it is when you're harvesting it, but when you're eating and you're hungry, it's not work. I mean, it's a lot less problems than that you would normally have. So one of the things that happened, and we've talked about it several times, is the Pharisees and Sadducees, they added to what Moses gave them. Okay? You go through all of Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy and all those, and they had first the 10 Commandments, and then I think it's 603 additional rules and regulations. Well, just like anything else, just like our lawyers today, something comes up and somebody wants it, well, what about this? It's something that's not in there. So then they would make another rule that would go on top of it. And where it said, where in the Sabbath day, honor the Sabbath day, it's holy, and in the 10 Commandments, from that they took, you can't do any work, you can't do any of this, you can't do any of that. So what they actually did, okay, what they were saying was illegal is, one, they reaped the corn or the wheat, they took it off the stalk, they broke it open, so that's threshing it, and then they winnowed it, they threw it up in the air and let the deals fall down, and then they popped the seeds in their mouth. So that's preparing food when they did all that. So those are the things that the Pharisees was upset about. So, they went into that much detail. So they had 4 different violations in just a mouthful of corn.
Jeez.
Or a mouthful of wheat, whatever it was. I think this, it goes into on page 2 at the top, it says, at this time, many rabbis filled Judaism with elaborate rituals related to the Sabbath and observance of other laws. Ancient rabbis taught that on a Sabbath, a man could not carry something in his right hand or in his left hand, across his chest or on his shoulder. Okay, so they're getting really particular here. But he could carry something with the back of his hand, or with his foot, or with his elbow, or in the ear, on the hair, on the hem of his shirt, or in his shoe, or a sandal. You see what I mean? It's just, they're nitpicking stuff to death. They want to obtain it so much, but then they add to it. They said, well, okay, yeah, you don't want to do that. That's not right. It says on the Sabbath day, one is forbidden to tie a knot, because that's work. Well, if you went down to the well and the bucket happened to come loose from the rope, you was in a world of hurt, because you couldn't draw that water. Okay, but they had something else. The woman could go down, she could tie the rope, her girdle, which is the linen part, to the bucket, and then tie the girdle to the rope, and then pull it up. What's the difference?
Oh my God.
I mean, that to me, that's just, it's making, it just, you can't make this stuff up, like they say. It's just one of those
Well,
things.
they did.
Well, they did, yeah. I mean, we can't. It's just like, why do we look at this? It went so bad that the Jews were so superstitious concerning the observance of the Sabbath that in their wars with Antiochus Epiphanes and the Romans, when they attacked them, they thought it was a crime to even attempt to defend themselves on the Sabbath. So if the Romans attacked them on the Sabbath, they was just going to get slaughtered because they wasn't even going to defend themselves because that's work.
They just be dead.
So, you know, that's one of the things that Jesus was trying to fight against, that a lot of this was just additional rituals, additional what the Pharisees ruled, and they didn't want to, you know, break those rules. It says even some Jewish people in Jesus' day recognized that the rules were about the Sabbath were mostly human additions to the laws. Carson quotes an ancient Jewish writing that said the rules about the Sabbath are as mountains hanging by a hair. Okay, for Scripture is scanty and the rules are many. So they have a lot of, you know, you can't find a lot to hang your hat on, kind of what it's saying. So Jesus defends himself. Verse, the next one, Brother Epperson.
But he said unto them, have you not read what David did when he was in hunger, and they that were with him? How he entered into the house of God and did eat the shewbread, which is not lawful for him to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the priest. Or have you not read in the law how that the Sabbath day the priest of the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? But I say to you, this is the place, that in this place is one greater than the temple. If you had known what this meaneth, I would have mercy and not sacrifice. You would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath day.
So he gave them some examples where people had already broken the Sabbath in the history, in the teachings that they had. The incident with David was a valid defense because first it was a case of eating. All right, David and his men had been out. It's when Saul was after him, and you know, he was trying to take his life. Saul was, because David, I think at this time Samuel had already anointed him to be king, but he wasn't going. Well, I guess he wasn't going to go against Saul. Okay. But Saul was still trying to take his life. He was running for him, and his men had nothing to eat, I can't remember, for several days. So he went to a tabernacle, went to the temple there, and he asked the priest at the time, do you guys have any bread that you can share with us? And why they went there is they were protecting that area from the Philistines and from the others that was trying to invade. Okay? So they thought, you know, we've been helping you out, won't you help us out a little bit? And the priest said, well, the only thing we got here available is a showbread that they take it out once a week, okay? They put new showbread in, and they take the old showbread out, and it's sitting there, and they can eat it, the priest can eat it. But the priest, if you go through and read that, he said, if you've not been with women, if you've not been this, and if you've not broken these laws, you can partake of it. David said, yep, we've been running for our lives. We ain't been around anybody, you know, this, that, and the other. So they gave him the showbread, and they went ahead and ate it. So that happened, and it said it probably happened on the Sabbath, in 1 Samuel 21 and 6, if you go back and read it. And it was not only David, but his people that was with him. So it's saying that because they were hungered, and the disciples too, when you read that, because they were hungered. Now, they didn't have a lot of fast food stores, didn't have a lot of shopping centers. They was out traveling around in the northern part in Galilee, and they had been, if we go back to last week, they'd been helping people, healing people, all these things, and they were making their way back down to Capernaum, I think is where they were going here. And So they didn't have any place. So as they was going that way, they was heading to the synagogue, to the temple, because it was Sabbath. And as they were going along, they were just taking grain out and popping them in their mouth as they were walking. Now the Old Testament, we read about that, and when we was talking about Numbers and Exodus, leave a little on the sides. When you reap your field, when you bring your field in, don't take the whole thing, leave the corners for the poor and the widows and everything. Well, these guys were poor. They didn't have anything. So that they qualified for that case. The disciples did. So that's the only reason that they were saying that, is because they considered that work to pop that off the wheat or the corn and to, break the kernel open and pop it in the mouth. And he goes through and he talks about the other example that they had. The priests. What do the priests do on the Sabbath? They don't sit around. People are bringing their sacrifices. They're flaying them goats and stuff and slicing them up, skinning them and burning them and all that. They're doing work.
Yeah.
Just like, and that's part of their job, so they're not breaking the Sabbath. That's part of it.
The priest was having accepted, so it's.
That's right. That's right. So he was trying to get to them. The last part of that said, "For the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath," and then they forget about mercy. Okay, they're so worried about the sacrifices and the rules. There needs to be a little bit of mercy in there. Okay, be lenient. Sometimes we're too strict in that case too. As far as, boy, that goes 90 miles an hour. I wish somebody cop would get him. Blast by you or cut you off or whatever. Where's the cop now? And he's, but it's the way it is, and we can't change it. What happens when we try to interfere like that, slow down, let somebody, pass you, a lot of times they'll cut you off then or do something crazy. Anymore, you don't want to do anything. You hardly want to drive because they take the whole road and they want it for themselves. But Jesus is saying he's even he's the Lord of the Sabbath. He's right here. And he is greater than the temple. They haven't ascertained, especially the Pharisees, that what he's talking about is he is God. He is a part of the Trinity. The Jews today, they believe in God. They don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in the Trinity. They don't believe in anything like that. They believe in God. So they had a real hard problem with this, with him starting to say that, making himself equal with God. That's just not something that they should do. It's what they thought. Bertha, you want to read 9 through 14 for us?
When he was departed thence, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man which had his hand withered. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days, that they might accuse him? And he said unto them, What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Then saith he to the man, Stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and held a council against him, how they might destroy him.
They were really getting upset because Jesus, they thought they had caught him. Okay, now they had the synagogue there, and one of the things that they did in the synagogue, and Jesus referred to this, I don't know if I brought it up a couple, 3 weeks ago, he told them that they like the high places, the high seats, you know, and I forget they call them something, Solomon seats or something, David seats. Those are the ones, if you would look at the way that the synagogue was there, they sat on the sides. It was very small. It's probably this size here and about half as much or 3/4 as much. And the person speaking was in the middle, sitting down, usually on a rock or something, and had the scroll laid out on a bigger rock. And he was reading from it, and everybody else was sitting around or standing around or whatever. But the seats that were right over here, that was the privileged. If you got asked to sit over there, you're a high class, boy. You're the ones. And that's what the Pharisees wanted. They wanted to be seated over there. Where this guy, he was probably back in the back somewhere, you know, with a withered hand. He was probably there. And I don't know, they were trying to entrap him, so I don't know if they went out and got this guy and brought him in just so Jesus would see him, or if the man just came on his own. We don't really know. But they asked him the question, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? So what would healing do? That's work. What they would consider work. It's as odd as that sounds to us, that's work. And what he did again, he gave them a story. He said, if you had a sheep out here and it fell in a pit on the Sabbath, would you wait till the next day to get that sheep out? Wolves might come by or whatever and get after. No, you're going to lift that sheep out. That's work. Okay? And that's what he's saying here. It's lawful to do well, to do good on the Sabbath. It's okay if you want to do this. And that's what he's trying to say with healing on the Sabbath day. It's okay to do good on the Sabbath day. But they didn't see it that way. They were so focused on that.
When you know the scripture where it said the heart is, deceitfully wicked. Mm-hmm. Everybody, it's like if somebody does something that you don't like, you want to get even.
Right.
And I'm thinking, Lord, help me. I don't want to have this attitude.
Uh-huh.
I want to, in other words, I want to do what's right.
Right.
Don't want to do what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But don't ever let me get to because you look at I just heard a statistic that said over 50% of the people were in other words, up to 16 weeks, you could abort a baby. That's over half of the population, basically. Okay. And I thought, how can anybody say that that's okay? But some of these people are very sincere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yet it's alive in the pits of hell.
That's right. That's right. They have bit it, swallowed it, the bait, and took it whole, and running with it. It's just crazy. I don't understand.
The churches, a lot of the churches today, we are talking about how far they were going to the extreme that way. Sometimes, it can be going the other way, and they let too much go on that shouldn't go on.
Right.
Because, they say, well, everybody has to work out their own salvation.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to work out your salvation according to this.
Right.
And they don't.
No, they want what's practical or what's in themselves, and you can't leave it. You need to leave it to the person, but the person needs to take it on themselves to look and see what's in the Word. If they don't, one, they're not growing, and you know, yeah, they may get saved, but they're not going to stay saved.
Right.
So, but we do get in a rut ourselves. I mean, they come in and I was watching, I think I told you a couple weeks ago, that Jesus Revolution, and they had a little church. This pastor in California had a little church. It probably had about like us. It showed up there, you know, a few people here, a few people there, a few people there, a few people there. And I can't remember how anyway, this one guy come in, oh, it's his daughter, the pastor's daughter, said, I've heard this guy, you need to talk to him, Daddy. You need to let him speak, you know, talk at church and everything. And he talked to him and he thought, okay, that's good. But it was back in the 70s. He was hippie looking, you know, had bell bottoms, flowery pants, vest, and all this stuff. And so when they came to church, he brought a few of his friends with him to the church. And the people was a little bit upset with that. And it finally, you know, grew to where they left. But one of the guys, one of the deals on the board members, he got up with them, you know, like he was going to leave, and then he went over and sat down in the middle of them and said, I'm here, you know, I'm going to stay here. But we need to understand that's an outward thing, you know, mainly what they were doing. But when people do things differently than us too, we need to be careful. We need to check ourselves. Sometimes I'll look at something and say, well, maybe I could do that different, where it wouldn't, you know, maybe I am a little too harsh on that. And it's still following the word, still following what it is. But that's where you say, you have to adjust yourself, and it may not be that you'll ever do that, but you're not going to jump all over everybody that's doing that.
Well, if it's sin,
yes,
they need to know that it's
correct.
Sin.
But the problem is there's a lot of things that aren't listed there as sin, and take our advice to members. You know, we used to hold to that like it was the 10 Commandments. And yeah, it's good advice. You need to follow that. But, you know, it's not going to. Some of the things that, you know, going bowling and things like that, it just you know, it's not going to make it through.
It's almost like they're saying shame.
Yeah.
Shame, like,
Yeah.
excuse me?
Okay, so Luke, with a comparison to this in Matthew, said that the critics of Jesus were filled with rage when he healed this man. That's kind of another little piece that was put into it. So that's when they said they went out and they started plotting to try to get Jesus, you know, to get rid of him in however way, shape, or form they could. Harold, you want to read 15 to 21?
But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew himself from thence, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all, and charged them that they should not make him known, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he shall show judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed shall he not break, and smoking flax shall he not quench, till he send forth judgment unto victory. And in his name shall the Gentiles trust.
So Jesus went ahead and he left. They were really mad at him, so he departed and left that area. And in the next one said great multitudes followed him. They were hearing these things, and it was a lot of it was to the miracles, you know, the miracles that he was doing for people, the healings, things like that. And we talked about this last week, and he healed them all. We don't know exactly how many, we don't know what he healed, we don't know what, all the different stories, but he took care of all of them, it says. And then he told them at that particular time, you shouldn't make him known. Don't spread it around that much. He wasn't trying to fan the flame of the Pharisees, trying to get them all upset. He wasn't doing this. He was trying to show them. Up until that time, he was giving them examples. Like you can, when you have a debate and the people get back and forth, well, now we get the politicians in the debates, like who can yell louder, and they just keep talking over one another so you can't hear anything. Well, that's kind of what they were getting in that mode, and he just said, no, you guys, I'm trying to give you guys a point, and you're not listening. You just aren't hearing me, that, you need to have a little mercy in here with what you're sprinkling in. You need to give a little bit on this stuff. So he reminded at that time them what was spoken by Isaiah, the prophet. He will put his spirit upon him and show judgment to the Gentiles. He goes through and says, he shall not strive nor cry, neither shall any man hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed shall he not break, and smoking flax shall he not quench, till he send forth judgment and victory. It goes back to John's disciples and some of his own disciples. When are we going to start beating these Romans up? When are we going to start taking over? And Jesus said, no, you don't understand. Isaiah prophesied this. You guys missed that. Yeah, Zechariah said, but that's in the future. We're going to come as a conquering, kingdom. But that's in the way future. Right now, I'm not going to even bruise a reed. I'm not going to bruise flax. He's not going to do anything to try to upset the apple cart as far as, getting anybody put out of office or anything like that. And that last part, and in his name shall the Gentiles trust. Oh, that just threw the Gentiles and the Jews into, arrhythmia. Because they were just, what about the Gentiles? They're going to start doing this too? They're going to start listening? One of the places it said, and I didn't know this, but it says one of the places down there at the bottom of 8, he won't bruise a fragile plant. It says a reed's a fairly large, kind of like a cocktail, or is a fairly fragile plant. If a reed is bruised, the servant will handle it so gently that he will not break it. And if flax, which is used as a wick for an oil lamp, does not flame but only smokes, he will quench it into extinguishing. Instead, he will not quench it, he will nourish it until it starts making a flame. So they use the flax part, the stems of the flax, as wicks in that particular. I didn't know that. So a lot of times we feel that God deals kind of roughly with our weaknesses and our failures when he really doesn't. He's really trying to edge us along, but yet help us grow in that process. So the final quotation from Isaiah 42 also speaks of the ultimate ministry of Jesus to the Gentiles. This was something surprising and probably or even offensive to Matthew's Jewish readers, but it is obviously scripture according to Isaiah 42. Okay, the next one's kind of long. If you want to read it, or read half of it maybe.
Where do you want me to stop?
Oh, it's just 22 to 24. Okay, sorry. I thought it was a little longer than that. Just read it.
Then was brought unto him one possessed with a devil, blind and dumb, and he healed him insomuch that the blind and dumb both spake and saw. And all the people were amazed, and said, Is not this the son of David?
Okay? So again, another person was brought to him, and it says he had a devil, and evidently it had blinded him and made him dumb, and said that Jesus healed him, insomuch that the blind and dumb both spake and saw. So he took the devil out, and somehow the devil was making him blind and making him, not able to speak. It so controlled him. They said that he was amazed. It was again a devil being cast out, and they were marveling, isn't this the son of David? They're starting to apply the Messiah title to Jesus. Isn't this the son of David? And then the Pharisees heard it, and of course they responded, no, he's just casting demons out by Satan, which is another, Beelzebub is another name for Satan. Jesus didn't like that very much, because he spoke right back to them.
Get it up here.
And Jesus knew their thoughts, and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? And if Beelzebub cast out devils, by whom do your children cast them out? Therefore they should be your judges. But if I cast out devils by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God is come unto you. Or else how can one enter into a strong man's house and spoil his goods, except he first bind the strong man, and then he will spoil his house? So he's giving them an example that why in the world would the devil cast out devils? He's working against himself. It's a civil war. He wouldn't do that. The devils won't work against one another. Now, they might not like one another. I don't know. But they surely aren't going to cast one of them out. Another devil's not going to cast another devil out. They're working together in conjunction with what Satan has, and that's what he's trying to tell them. He is divided against himself. How in the world is that kingdom going to stand? Well, it's not. And he said, okay, if I cast them out, and you're saying this by Beelzebub, how are you casting them out? He turns it right around to them. Well, how are you guys doing it if you do, And then he goes on and says, but if I cast the devil out by the Spirit of God, then the kingdom of God has come unto you. And then he gives another little story. How are you going to enter into a strong man's house unless you're stronger than he is, and you bind him up, and then you can spoil his goods, take his goods from him? Okay? What he's saying is he's stronger than Satan. He can bind Satan, he can hold him up, and he can take what Satan has, which is his people, and he's letting them go. But to go into that house, I have to be stronger than them. Now, that's not talking about us. That's talking about Jesus. As long as we have him in our lives, we can't do anything ourselves. Now, I've heard some ministers say that they have seen demons and imps, and they're just little bitty things like this. And I said, well, I don't care. I don't really want to mess with them. I'll let him take care of them. I'm not going to worry about it too much.
Brother Benny Kitchen one time, Steve and Robert, where they were real young ministers, he was sort of like, give them some pointers. He said, I won't tell you something, boys. Better not stir up no more of the devil than you can cast out.
That's right. That's right. You need to be careful. one of those things that we don't want to, you know, and I'm not, there are certain people that do that a lot in their ministry. There's a lot of things that I don't know. I'm not there and I can't see what's going on. Some people, it's doing it for show. Some people it's not. We don't know. I can take it on the missionaries that I've talked to and visited. Yeah, it happens. It happens. We don't see it much over here, I think, but I do think there are places in the world, and I think this place is getting worse and worse.
I was gonna say, I think more of it's coming to America.
I think it is too. I think it's being invaded, that the people, like the ones that you said, I think the social media, like you were saying a few days ago, I just said something the other day. Senator Langford was on there and said, keep up the good fight. That's all said, tweeted on there. Man, they started lambing. What good fight has he done? What is he doing? Well, they called him some name, Watford or something. Lackford, that's what it was. What has Lackford done for us? And then they got off, oh, he's just, he believes in all this mythology and all this stuff. And I'm just like, man, you guys, then I started thinking, I bet they got a routine that puts this out. But those are just bots that just bash anybody that they've highlighted that's a Christian nature in there, because that would make sense to me. Because today I saw another one, and there's like 4 individuals that did the same thing. I didn't mention anything today, but I was reading it. He was giving some things, reports on different things. It's totally off subject what you're bringing up. I don't get that. So I'm almost like, that's a bot that's doing that.
We were listening and watching a Christian program on the TV here a few weeks ago, and there's a medical doctor in the Kansas Senate, the state of Kansas, and he had put through a bill saying, something about the fetus, and whatnot, and he thought it was, he just thought it would pass without any problem, his bill, and he said he could not believe the pushback that he got about that, and how that people were just all over him, and he said, and some of them were even down in the floor, riven, and he said, you think, it felt like they had demons in them.
Yeah, I could almost believe that.
So, like I said, it's here.
Yeah.
He had put forth a bill that if the baby during an abortion was born alive, that it would get medical treatment and not just allowed to die.
Yeah.
And more people were all over him, and
That's just
keeping it from passing.
That's crazy. That's just, they are getting so outright, so forthright that they want to kill babies.
Yeah, he got called to the emergency room because the baby had ended up being alive, and he took care of it for like 24 hours.
Yeah.
It went ahead and passed.
Yeah.
Then he went forth trying to get legislation, because the other people was just ignoring it.
Yeah. It's almost kind of like the Jews not wanting to do anything on the Sabbath. If somebody's attacking. Brother Epson, 30 through 32.
He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth abroad. Wherefore I say unto you, all manner of sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men, but the blasphemy against the Holy Ghost shall not be forgiven unto men. And whosoever speaketh a word against the Spirit of man, it shall be forgiven him. But whoso speaketh against the Holy Ghost, it shall not be forgiven him, neither in this world, neither in the world to come.
So it's saying that a lot of these things that people are saying, today, they still can be redeemed. They're not doing the things that, we think, oh my gosh, they're totally off the wall. There are a lot of people that can be saved if they would listen. The problem is they've been warped. As Paul said, let their psyche's been warped so that they don't want to be, have any morality at all. I was reading today an article that over 100 years ago, it was some metaphysics type person, I think he's in Russia maybe. It was like 1902. He said there'll come a day when there'll be a drug that they'll give it to the masses and they'll just be happy as a lark and they won't have anything and they won't need, want anything, just their drug. I said, well, we're there today, boy. That's what it is. They're going to be happy and I think part of that is they're trying to introduce that today. That's what the WEF, that Klaus Schwab, he's saying that same thing. That in the future you'll be happy. And you won't own a thing. You won't own a house. You won't own a car or anything. But you'll be happy about it. And I'm like, maybe over there, and maybe in certain cities, because what the people right now that I can see that's in, like Portland and all the different places, Seattle, they want to do, they're saying there's now mobs going in, 40 or 50 people, gangs is actually what it is. They'll go into Home Depot and just rob it blind, and there's so many of them, they just stand back. And the police can't even do anything about it because 40 or 50 of them, they don't have that many police in certain little towns.
Some places in California, about 30s, went into a real high dollar and stole over $900,000 in jewelry and call it smash and grab.
Yeah.
And the company policies, a lot of times,
Yeah.
if an employee tries to stop one of them, they get fired because they say, no, you're not supposed to, interfere. You didn't follow company policy.
And they go back that, well, the insurance will take care of it. Well, I'm paying for that because it's the price of that good, that I'm paying for just double.
There's only one thing I see that protects sometimes. It keeps employees from getting hurt.
Yeah.
Other than that,
But I think most people wouldn't try to do something if they didn't feel like they're capable of doing it.
Or even just call the police and they're not allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of.
Walking by us, by Alec, listen, I've seen him walk out. Just walk out.
Well, yeah, people do that a lot now. They just, it's like,
Walk right by the cash.
how in the world can you? They think it's owed them for whatever reason people do, and I don't understand that. Like,
Well, it's what the Bible tells us is happening.
Sure.
What's going to happen in the last days.
Sure.
Lawlessness,
Will
lawlessness,
Yeah.
and the selfishness and all of that.
Yeah.
This last, here, we could, denying Christ, denying the Holy Spirit, I got saved because I got convicted of my sin. And when we continue to deny the working of the Holy Spirit, and we reject Him, we're lost.
Right.
And we're getting to a world that don't even believe.
Right.
Here, used to, and even in our politics and stuff, if a man was good, attended a local church and stuff, well, he was considered somebody good. Now, if they attend church, they're not fit for office. They're radicals and bigots, and it just keeps getting worse.
It's got to be their church.
Yeah, right.
And they have certain churches that are acceptable to them, which is pushing the agenda, which a lot of them are now, even the churches. Let's go to 33 to 37. You want to read that for us, Bertha? Page 13.
Okay, found it. Either make the tree good and his fruit good, or else make the tree corrupt and his fruit corrupt. For the tree is known by his fruit. O generation of vipers, how can you be evil, speak good things? For out of the good treasure, out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasure say unto you, that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account therefore in the day of the judgment. For by your words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned.
So it's basically showing the depravity of the religious leaders at that particular time. They are doing these things thinking that they're right, but they're not. Okay, if you think you're doing evil and you're doing good, or somebody speaks good and you think it's evil, it's got to be what's coming from your heart. And what they were thinking, again, he's trying to tell them, you got to have some mercy in there. Whatever your heart is, if you're speaking it and you're just repeating the tune, you know, you're not doing what he's telling them to do. Out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things. But an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. If somebody is bent on doing something wrong, they're going to do something wrong. Two wrongs aren't going to make a right. And they don't see it that way. And then he goes back and it talks again about the words. It talked about that back in the Sermon on the Mount. They shall give every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account of in that day. That scares me to death. Every idle word that we speak. So we got to be justified by the words we speak. And we've got to be working for him.
Well, these two that do these crimes, they have no conscience.
No, today, that's what it's getting worse and worse. But what they were trying to do at that particular time, they were just, following the rote routine over and over again and not allowing any lead or any give on certain things. And the things that they were doing was not good. And they go about, he was just touching the tip of the iceberg, but he goes into the evil things that they're doing. It's making, because he was talking about more so probably about their heart. If you're doing these things, you're probably doing a lot more elsewhere that we're not seeing. Then we go into like Caiaphas and Annas, that when they started plotting, it's kind of what he's talking about. You're plotting about killing me. He didn't say that right out front, but that's what they're doing. Out of the evil thoughts, that's what's I'm not going against what you normally would think a good rabbi is. So you're wanting to do away with it. That's evil. Okay, 38 through 40. You want to read that, Harold?
Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. But he answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth.
Okay. So here again, the scribes and the Pharisees wanted them to see a sign. What had he been doing the whole time? What had he been healing people, raising people from the dead, feeding people, the 5,000? I don't know if we've got to that yet. But he's been doing all these miracles, and yet they want to see a sign from him. So he kind of rebukes them a little bit. An evil and adulterous generation looks for signs. He said, I'll tell you a sign. Remember this story about Jonah? Where he got swallowed up in the whale for 3 days and 3 nights? So shall the Son of Man also be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth.
Well, what kind of sign did they want?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. What else could he have done? He raised people from the dead. I mean, that's pretty spectacular.
Well, we read more than once where it said he healed them all. All.
I think what they were wanting to do is they want you to speak word and the Romans would be, boom, they'd be dead. And it'll be our country. Here again, I think they're going back to this, we're under, repression or aggression. oppression from the Romans, and that's not the way we should be.
And they were, even though they were still had a certain amount of authority over the Jews, they were losing their authority. I mean, because it was no longer just a Jewish empire, it was a Roman empire.
It was Roman empire.
And the Jews existed in it, and they were losing their power, they was losing their place and position. And
A little later on, we'll see, they had authority up to a limit, because they couldn't go anybody to condemn them to death. They had to go on to Pilate, remember? And then he sent them on to Herod and all this stuff. They only had certain amount. So now some of the things, you know, I don't know why it was different, but if they would incite the people to do it, like stoning people and things like that. But the Sanhedrin, when they got their little police force involved, they could only do certain amount of things. They could whip them and do things like that, but then they had to be careful, because if it's a Roman citizen, they had to have the right charges. Otherwise, they go cry to the Romans, and then they'd get beat. You know, they'd be replaced. So that's the only thing I could think of, a sign that they wanted that may have, you know, go from then.
talk about there, we're talking about, you know, where it says 3 days and 3 nights. And that causes quite a bit of.
It does. A lot of people. How in the world can you do that? Well, go ahead.
Will Alton, he put a deal on it. His wife, who was telling his wife he was educating his wife, he told her that he was going to go fishing, and she said, how long? He said, half a day. Well, at 12 o'clock, she called him and wanted to know where he was at. She said, well, a day is 24 hours. A half a day is 12 hours.
Yeah, I've only been out 4 hours. Yeah, any part of a day in the Jewish, at that time, and even I think now, is considered a day. It's not considered 32 or 72 hours. That's not what it's trying to get across here. It may have been that long for Jonah. We don't know exactly. It says 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a whale. But the time that Jesus, you go through it, any part of a day, and their day starts at 6 o'clock that evening, that's the first of their day, and it goes through. So if it started at 5 o'clock, when Jesus died, they think it's about 3 o'clock, then he's been gone a day, even those 3 hours. So then that's considered a, quote, day. And then that night would be till the next morning, and then go on like that. So you can get it in there. Now, it's not a true 72 hours between when he died and not. And other people say, well, he wasn't really, there was a high holy day. That's when he was sacrificed, and that one, or died, and that was actually on Wednesday. That's when he died, and then it works out, or whatever day it was. That's it. I think we're losing a little bit when we go through that. It happened, and we don't know exactly how it happened, but we do know, you know, the approximate time. 41 and 42. Read that, Janet.
The man of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonas, and behold, a greater than Jonas is here. The queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation, and shall condemn it, for she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here.
So we see, here again, he's just continuing on with this story about Nineveh and the story of Jonah, that they repented when Jonah gave his story, and also a little later, or earlier on, the Queen of Sheba, she came up and was listening to Solomon because of that. It says, this generation is looking for somebody, and behold, somebody here is greater than Solomon. It's greater than Jonah. and you're looking for a sign. You know, he did all of it, a lot more than what these guys did so far. And they're still looking for a sign. Go ahead and finish up. And when then it jumps to when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking the rest, and findeth none. Then he saith, I will return into my house from whence I came out. And when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept, and garnished. Then goeth he and taketh himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so it shall be unto this wicked generation. So he's just talking about the spirits. It kind of jumps, the story jumps a little bit to talking about how the demons, if they going around, as we said, they want a body. I don't think they have to have a body, but they want to inhabit a body so they can wreak havoc. But if they don't have a body, they can't really do anything physically. Okay? So that's what they were wanting. But if you don't keep that vessel clean and get filled after it's been cleaned out, then it's more likely it's going to be refilled with that demon. And he's going to bring along some of his friends too. So, and then let's go ahead and read the last part. While he yet talked to the people, behold, his mother and his brethren stood without, desiring to speak with him. Then one said unto him, Behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto him that told him, Who is my mother, and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hands toward his disciples, and said, Behold, my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. So, this is a kind of a little odd as far as looks like he's turning his family away. But they were wanting to talk to him, to visit with him, I don't know, maybe to calm him down a little bit. He's bringing about all this kind of ruckus at this particular time. And he was trying to show them, you know, that they had no special favor with him. They were his family, yes. But okay, they wanted to talk to me. Well, I'm talking to all these people right here, right now. I need to talk to them. All these people, I feel like all these are my mothers, my fathers, my sisters, my brothers. These are the ones that I'm trying to teach. And in my view, after I'm finished, I'll talk with them. You know, it doesn't say that in the word, but he's trying to show them that each one of these, he came for all of the people. He didn't come just for his family, just to get them saved, or just to help them. So, it said, Mary, the mother of Jesus, had no special favor with Jesus either then or now. She stands as a wonderful example of one who was privileged by God and stood by Jesus, but she is not on a higher level than anyone who does the will of the Father in heaven. That's where the Roman Catholic Church gets off on it a little bit. They place her higher, or almost as high, as Jesus himself. Probably just as high, is what I would say. And it goes back to the saying he said earlier, contrast the evil and adulterous generation represented by the Pharisees, these beloved ones who do the will of God, are so much different than those people. Okay? Said, we can see this as a gracious invitation even to these religious leaders who deepened their hostility against Jesus and plotted against him. They could still come and be part of his family if they wanted to. I don't think he's disrespecting his family or anything like that, trying to tell them, because a little later on he tells John to take, here's your mother, you take care of her now, I'm going to be gone. So we also see this in another part, and then later on, I think in Luke, it actually names some of his brothers. And then it says sisters too. We don't have their names. But now we don't know if these were children of Joseph, and Jesus was the last, just Mary, or more likely, the way I think, is they had more kids after Jesus. May have had some half-brothers, before, and then some brothers after, or sisters after. I don't know.
Well, while John and Jesus were traveling, evidently Joseph was still a live son to take care of his wife.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know.
Here he's not mentioned, so we assume by this time he's gone. It's kind of what you have to assume, because
So
it didn't say his mother and father. It says your mother and your brother and sisters are here.
So someone was always taking care of his mother.
Yeah. And I think we see that with the brothers and the sisters that are there. Okay, they're staying with it. She's old enough at this particular time to 33 plus 14, 44, 45. I know it doesn't sound old today, but it's old enough at that particular time that she probably wouldn't, she's following her son.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't do that. We see him at the Cana, the wedding at Cana. We see her several places, following Jesus around some, going with him. Some places we don't hear of her at all, but some places we do.
Well, surely he made wherever she was, and she was taking care of.
Just kind of historical, they say that Joseph was older than she was. Don't know about how much. So whenever that happens, usually the husband dies first. So. Questions or comments or anything?
Very good.
I just see that Jesus was, because the people were there around him, and he just saw that that was an opportunity to teach and to do kingdom work. And, the natural, the family, that could wait.
Right. He saw at this particular time, and I don't know exactly where this was, but